3 weeks passed after the first battle. Earth used every moment to prepare. The shipyards never stopped working. Workers fixed damaged dreadnoughts and built new weapons. Everyone knew the Valreth would return. The only question was when. Dr. Yuna Choi worked in her laboratory day and night. She was 45 and led the weapons research team. After the first battle, human soldiers captured pieces of destroyed Valreth ships. Choi studied the alien technology carefully. She learned how their shields worked, how their weapons fired, how their ships moved. Every piece of information could save lives in the next fight. Admiral Kang called a meeting with his officers. Captain Huang reported that the Indomitable needed another week of repairs. Commander Park showed maps of the solar system with predicted Valreth attack routes. Lieutenant Nam and his pilots trained every day, knowing the next battle would be even more dangerous. Some politicians wanted to negotiate with the Valreth. They argued that humanity got lucky once but couldn't win again. Kang shut down this talk quickly. The Valreth didn't negotiate with species they considered prey. They only respected strength. Earth had to show strength or die. Far from Earth, High Commander Velrax gathered the largest fleet in Valreth history, 4,000 warships from 12 different conquest fleets. Among them were 3 world-killer ships, massive vessels carrying weapons that could literally crack a planet apart. These weapons had ended civilizations before. They would end humanity. War Prince Kethris watched the fleet assemble with growing worry. This much force seemed like too much. The humans had won one battle, yes, but was destroying them completely necessary? He tried to talk to Velrax about showing some restraint. Perhaps they could offer terms again. Velrax refused. His pride was wounded. The Empire's reputation was damaged. Every species in the galaxy would hear about the defeat if the Valreth didn't respond with overwhelming force. No, he decided. Humanity would be completely destroyed. Not conquered, destroyed. Nothing would remain but dust and memories. Fleet Master Dravok commanded the vanguard of this new armada. He was determined to redeem himself after the first defeat. This time would be different. This time the Valreth would not underestimate their enemy. This time they would crush the humans through pure firepower. Scholar Theiss remained imprisoned, but she managed to send a message to a young officer who sympathized with her. The warning was simple. Humans fight differently than other species. They don't follow rules. They don't care about honor in battle. They only care about winning. The Valreth needed to understand this or they would lose again. The message never reached Velrax. The young officer was too afraid to deliver it. The Valreth armada arrived at the edge of the solar system like a storm of metal and death. 4,000 ships against 32 human dreadnoughts. The mathematics seemed simple. The Valreth would win. It was impossible for them to lose. Admiral Kang watched them come. The displays showed more red dots than he could count. Every simulation his team ran showed the same result. If the humans fought near Earth, they would lose. The Valreth had too many ships, too many weapons. Humanity couldn't win a direct battle, so Kang didn't plan to fight a direct battle. He gave the order that shocked everyone. Retreat. Pull back from Earth. Fall back to the asteroid belt. Make the Valreth chase them. To the Valreth, this looked like cowardice. The humans were running away. Velrax saw this as proof that the first victory was just luck. Now the primitives understood their true situation. He ordered a full pursuit. The entire fleet would chase the humans and destroy them in the asteroid belt. What Velrax didn't know was that humanity had spent months preparing the asteroid belt. Those rocks floating in space weren't just rocks anymore. The human dreadnoughts took defensive positions among the asteroids. The Valreth fleet surrounded them, forming a massive sphere of ships. Dravok saw his chance for revenge. He ordered his ships to close in and destroy the trapped humans. Then the asteroids started moving, not floating naturally but moving with purpose under power. What the Valreth thought were natural space rocks were actually fortresses, hundreds of them. Each one hollowed out by human miners and filled with weapons. The asteroid belt exploded into violence. Valreth ships suddenly took fire from every direction. Missiles launched from hidden tubes. Railguns fired from rocks that looked completely natural. Laser batteries that had been cold and hidden suddenly blazed to life. Captain Huang led the Indomitable in a charge through the Valreth left flank. Her ship's weapons never stopped firing. Other dreadnoughts followed her lead, each one focusing fire on specific enemy ships. The humans fought with perfect coordination, like parts of a single machine. Commander Park coordinated the defense from his station aboard the Defiance. He watched the battle like a chess game, moving pieces, calculating odds. When Valreth ships clustered together, he directed fire at those points. The explosions would damage nearby ships. One shot could hurt 5 targets. Lieutenant Nam flew through the asteroid field like it was his natural home. His fighter squadron used the rocks as cover, appearing from behind one asteroid to fire missiles, then disappearing behind another before the Valreth could shoot back. His arrogance from before the war was gone, burned away by watching friends die. Now he was just focused on survival and victory. The battle raged for hours. The Valreth had more ships, but the humans had the better position. Every advantage of terrain belonged to humanity. Every surprise was on their side. Slowly, the Valreth fleet began to break apart. Then Belrax played his final card. The 3 world killer ships, protected in the rear of his formation, began charging their weapons. These massive vessels could destroy planets. Surely they could destroy the human fleet. He targeted Earth directly. If he couldn't conquer the humans, he would erase them completely from existence. War Prince Kethris watched in horror. Felrax was going to destroy Earth while humans still lived on it. This wasn't conquest. This wasn't even war. This was genocide. He protested, but Velrax ignored him. The High Commander had gone beyond caring about honor or rules. He wanted revenge. Admiral Kang saw the world killers charging their weapons. He had prepared for this moment too. Everything about the battle was designed to put the Valreth in exactly this position. He gave the order that would change the war. Activate the suppression field. Deep in the asteroid belt, Dr. Choi's greatest creation came to life. The quantum suppression array was built from captured Valreth technology and improved by human scientists. When it activated, it created an invisible field that disrupted the specific frequencies the Valreth used for their most advanced systems. Across the battlefield, Valreth ships suddenly went silent. Their long-range communications died. Worse, the World Killer's charging sequences stopped. The weapons that were seconds from firing simply shut down. The quantum frequencies they needed to work were being scrambled by the suppression field. The Valreth fleet was now deaf and partially blind. Their most powerful weapons were useless. The battle that had been difficult suddenly became impossible for them. But Dr. Choi knew the suppression field couldn't last forever. The generators were overheating. She calculated they had 20 minutes before the whole system failed. She told Admiral Kang, 20 minutes to win or lose everything. Kang gave the order for maximum aggression. Every human ship, every weapon, every fighter opened fire without stopping. They had 20 minutes. They would use every second. Captain Huang pushed the Indomitable beyond its design limits. Warning lights filled her bridge. Engineers screamed that the reactors were failing. She ignored them. Her ship became a blazing weapon, destroying everything in its path. Commander Park targeted the Valreth command ships. Without communications, killing the admirals would leave their fleets leaderless. He directed fire with cold precision. One by one, Valreth command vessels exploded. Fleetmaster Dravok realized too late that he had been tricked again. Everything was planned. The retreat, the asteroid belt, the suppression field. The humans had led the Valreth into a trap so complete that escape was almost impossible. As his flagship took critical damage, he had one final thought. These humans fought like nothing else in the galaxy. With 5 minutes left on the suppression field, the Valreth fleet broke. Ships that could still move began retreating. The world killers, massive and defenseless, tried to flee but were too slow. Human forces concentrated all fire on them. The 3 giant ships exploded one after another, lighting up space like 3 new suns. The battle ended. Humanity had won again, but the cost was terrible. 8 dreadnoughts destroyed, 5 more so badly damaged they might never fight again. Nearly 400 pilots dead, thousands of crew members lost. The casualty list seemed endless. Admiral Kang walked through the corridors of the Defiance after the battle. He saw exhausted faces, wounded crew members, people who had followed his orders into hell and survived. He had won 2 battles against impossible odds, but the weight of all those deaths pressed down on him like a mountain. Captain Huang assessed the damage to her ship. The Indomitable had survived, but barely. Systems were failing throughout the vessel. It would take months to repair. But her crew had fought brilliantly. Every single one deserved recognition for their sacrifice. The Valreth ships appeared at the edge of the solar system like dark clouds before a storm. High Commander Velrax stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Sovereign Talon, and looked at the screen showing Earth and its nearby planets. He smiled. This would be easy. The Valreth had conquered 17 species before humans. Every time it was the same story. They arrived with their massive fleet. The primitives saw the ships and surrendered. Sometimes there was a small fight, but it never lasted long. The Valreth had weapons that could destroy cities in seconds. They had shields that nothing could break through. They had ruled the galaxy for 300 years. Velrax looked at the data his officers brought him. Humans used chemical rockets to move between planets. Their weapons were simple explosives and metal bullets. Their technology was hundreds of years behind the Valreth. This would be the easiest conquest yet. Scholar Thys, the Valreth scientist studying humans, stood near the back of the bridge. She looked worried. Her instruments showed something strange. Earth's moon had huge factories built into it. The asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter showed signs of massive construction. Energy readings didn't match what primitive humans should have. She stepped forward and spoke to Velrax. Her voice was quiet but urgent. The humans were hiding something, she said. They had been preparing for something. The High Commander should be careful, Velrax laughed. His officers laughed with him. Preparing for what? For gods from the stars? These humans didn't even know the Valreth existed until today. He waved this away like she was an annoying insect. The invasion would begin immediately. Fleetmaster Drevok commanded the 4th Battle Fleet. 1,000 warships, each 1 kilometers long. They jumped into Earth's orbit in a show of power that should have made any species fall to their knees. The ships filled the sky above the planet. Their weapons pointed down at the cities below. Drevok sent a message to Earth. The words were simple and direct. Surrender now. Become part of the Valreth Empire. Pay tribute. Obey. Humans had 24 hours to decide. If they refused, the bombardment would begin. Cities would burn. Millions would die. Resistance was useless. On Earth, in a deep underground command center, Admiral Deho Kang watched the alien fleet arrive. Around him, politicians panicked. Some wanted to surrender immediately. Others argued for negotiation. Fear filled the room like smoke. Kang was 53 years old. He had fought in wars between human nations before. He had commanded ships in battles around Mars and Jupiter when colonies there rebelled. He knew war. He knew death. He also knew something the politicians didn't. 15 years ago, humanity detected strange signals from nearby star systems. Signs of alien civilization, signs of wars and conquests. Kang convinced the world governments to prepare. If aliens existed and if they fought wars, Earth might be next. So humanity prepared. In secret, they built new weapons, new ships. They studied every scrap of alien technology they could detect from light years away. They trained. They planned. They got ready for a war they hoped would never come. Kang stood up and silenced the room with one sentence. The dreadnoughts are ready. The politicians stared at him. What dreadnoughts? What was he talking about? Kang explained calmly. For 15 years, humanity had built a secret fleet. 32 massive warships, each one designed specifically to fight aliens. They were hidden behind the moon, waiting. The technology wasn't as advanced as the Valreth, but it didn't need to be. It just needed to work. Humanity's response to the Valreth ultimatum was silence. No message. No surrender. Just waiting. The aliens thought this was fear. They were wrong. 23 hours after the deadline, Drevok grew impatient. He ordered his fleet to prepare weapons. The bombardment would teach these primitives the price of defiance. His officers began charging the plasma cannons that could turn cities into glass. Then the sensors detected something. Ships, moving out from behind Earth's moon. Big ships. Very big ships. 32 of them moving into formation. Captain Minji Huang commanded the lead ship, the U.S. Indomitable. She was 38 years old and had spent the last 5 years preparing for this moment. Her ship was 2 kilometers long, covered in weapons that human scientists designed by studying alien signals. Everything about the Indomitable was built for one purpose: to kill alien warships. Behind her, 31 other dreadnoughts moved into battle formation. They looked crude compared to the elegant Valreth ships. They were blocky, ugly, covered in armor and weapons with no care for beauty. But they were ready. Drevok looked at the human ships and felt nothing but contempt. 32 ships against 1,000. This was insulting. He ordered his fleet to destroy them quickly. His officers moved to execute the standard Valreth battle formation, the same pattern they had used to conquer 17 species. Commander Junho Park sat in the war room aboard the flagship UES Defiance with Admiral Kang. Park was only 29 but brilliant. He watched the Valreth fleet moving exactly as the simulations predicted. The aliens were following their doctrine perfectly. They were predictable. That was their first mistake. The first Valreth battle group moved close and fired. Plasma bolts that could vaporize mountains struck the human shields. The Valreth expected the primitive ships to explode. Instead, the plasma splashed harmlessly across electromagnetic fields. The human shields weren't like Valreth shields. They worked differently, and the Valreth weapons couldn't penetrate them easily. Before Dravok could understand what happened, the humans fired back. The weapons were simple compared to Valreth technology, just metal slugs, accelerated to incredible speeds by magnetic rails. Simple, primitive, but they worked. The tungsten slugs hit Valreth shields at a fraction of light speed. The shields designed to stop energy weapons barely slowed the physical projectiles. Ships exploded. The first Valreth battle group lost 40 ships in 90 seconds. Dravok stared at his screens in shock. How? How were primitives killing his ships? He quickly reorganized his fleet, bringing his heavier battleships forward. He still had overwhelming numbers. He could still win this. Admiral Kang watched the battle unfold exactly as planned. The Valreth were strong but rigid. They followed patterns. Humans didn't. He gave the order for Phase 2. Throughout the solar system, hidden weapons platforms activated. Humans had spent years building them in secret. Hundreds of them hidden in asteroids and on moons. They all fired at once. The Valreth fleet found itself surrounded. Attacks came from every direction. Rocks the size of buildings, launched at incredible speeds, smashed into ships. The aliens tried to adapt, but they were caught completely off guard. Lieutenant Taeyang Nam led a squadron of human fighters into the chaos. He was 26, cocky, and one of the best pilots Earth had. His small fighter weaved between giant warships, launching missiles at weak points. The Valreth point defense systems couldn't track something so small and fast. The Battle of Earth's moon lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Valreth 4th Battle Fleet was destroyed. More than 300 ships were gone. The survivors fled back to their staging area. Human losses were light by comparison. 3 damaged dreadnoughts. 200 dead pilots and crew. It hurt, but humanity had won. High Commander Velrax received the news aboard the Sovereign Talon. He couldn't believe it. The Valreth Empire had never lost a battle, not once in 300 years. And now primitives had destroyed an entire fleet. War Prince Kethris, Velrax's second-in-command, tried to warn him. These humans were different. They fought differently. They thought differently. The Empire needed to study them, understand them, before attacking again. Velrax refused to listen. He executed 3 of his officers for the defeat. Then he sent a message to the Valreth homeworlds. He demanded more ships, more weapons. He wanted the world killers. The ultimate weapons that could destroy entire planets. The humans would pay for their defiance. They would all die. Scholar Thys watched from her cell. Velrax had imprisoned her for warning him about the humans. Now she could only wait and hope someone would listen before the Empire destroyed itself through arrogance. On Earth, Admiral Kang looked at the casualty lists. They had won, but the price was already high. Young men and women dead, ships damaged, and he knew this was just the beginning. The Valreth would come back with everything they had. Humanity had bloodied an Empire's nose. Empires don't forgive that. Captain Huang walked through the damaged corridors of the Indomitable. Her crew was exhausted but alive. They had fought well, but she knew the next battle would be harder. The Valreth wouldn't underestimate them again. The war had begun. Earth had won the first battle through surprise and preparation. But the Valreth Empire controlled hundreds of worlds and could field thousands of ships. Humanity was alone, surrounded, and facing an enemy that would rather destroy them completely than accept defeat. The real test was still to come. 6 months passed after the second battle. The Valreth returned, but not with another huge fleet. Instead, they built a wall around the solar system. Fortified positions at every exit point. Weapons platforms that could destroy any ship trying to leave. The message was clear. Humanity was trapped. The strategy was simple and brutal. Wait, humans had impressive industry, but it needed resources that would eventually run out. Their population needed food. Their weapons needed materials. Given enough time, the blockade would strangle humanity's ability to fight. Admiral Kang understood the trap immediately. This was a war of attrition, and time favored the Valreth. The Dreadnoughts sat in defensive positions, conserving fuel and ammunition. Every resource became precious. Food rationing began on Earth. The colonies on Mars and the moons cut back on everything. People who celebrated 2 victories now felt the slow pressure of the siege. War Prince Kethris personally oversaw the blockade. He knew patience was the key. Scholar Thys remained his advisor, helping him understand how humans thought. She warned him that humans were most dangerous when cornered. They would try something desperate rather than slowly accept defeat. Kethris increased surveillance of the inner system, watching for whatever humanity was planning. As months turned into a year, the strain began to show. Captain Huang dealt with declining morale among her crew. They sat idle while Earth slowly suffocated. She created training programs and war games to keep people sharp, but she could see the despair in their eyes. They had won 2 battles but might still lose the war. Commander Park analyzed the blockade constantly, looking for weaknesses. The Valreth positions were perfect. Overlapping defensive fire, redundant supply lines, deep defensive positions. Breaking through would cost the entire fleet and accomplish nothing. Every simulation ended in failure. His frustration grew with each failed calculation. Lieutenant Nam led reconnaissance missions into deep space, probing the blockade for weak points. His squadron suffered losses. The Valreth were patient but merciless with scouts. He lost more friends, more skilled pilots. The war was grinding down humanity's best people, one small fight at a time. On Earth, protests erupted. Food was adequate but declining. Some politicians demanded negotiations, even surrender. Others wanted immediate action, not understanding that the fleet couldn't break the blockade. Admiral Kang faced pressure from all sides but refused to waste his forces on meaningless gestures. Dr. Choi had been working alone for months, pursuing a solution so extreme she initially kept it secret. Now, with time running out, she brought her work to Admiral Kang. A weapon so powerful and so dangerous that using it would change humanity forever. The weapon was simple in concept, but terrifying in reality. Self-replicating nanomachines designed to consume Valreth ships from the inside. Once deployed, it would spread through their fleet like a disease. Possibly beyond. The moral weight was staggering. It was essentially a doomsday weapon that could spread across the galaxy. Admiral Kang called his senior staff to debate the weapon. Captain Huang argued against it. Using such a weapon would make humanity no better than the Valreth. Commander Park saw it practically. Survival was more important than ethical concerns. Lieutenant Nam, having lost so many friends, wanted revenge regardless of the cost. The debate lasted for days. Political leaders joined in, split between those who would do anything to survive and those who feared becoming monsters. Dr. Choi defended her creation coldly. She built it because humanity needed options, even terrible ones. The decision to use it was above her authority. Admiral Kang made his choice. They would prepare the weapon but not deploy it immediately. First, humanity would attempt one final conventional breakout. If that failed, if there was truly no other option, then the weapon would become their last resort. It satisfied no one but bought time for alternatives. The plan was desperate. Concentrate the entire fleet at one point in the blockade and punch through with overwhelming force. It would likely cost half the fleet, but if even some ships broke free, they could reach the wider galaxy. Find allies. Spread word of the Valreth threat. Bring help. Commander Park identified the weakest point in the blockade, a section where Valreth supply lines were stretched thin. It was still heavily defended, but it was their best chance. Admiral Kang ordered every operational dreadnought, every fighter, every weapon that could move to prepare for the assault. Captain Huang prepared the Indomitable for what might be its last mission. Her engineers had worked miracles keeping the ship operational despite resource shortages. She addressed her crew honestly. This operation would likely destroy the ship, but it might save humanity. Not a single crew member requested transfer. Lieutenant Nam and his squadron would lead the assault, flying ahead of the dreadnoughts to suppress Valreth defenses. Everyone knew it was a suicide mission disguised as reconnaissance. He knew it, his pilots knew it. They volunteered anyway. Too many friends had died to back down now. The fleet moved into position. Admiral Kang gave one final speech to all ships. They were fighting not just for themselves, but for every species that might face the Valreth in the future. Win or lose, humanity would prove that resistance was possible, that arrogance could be challenged, that even an empire could bleed. The assault began with Nam's fighters screaming toward the Valreth line. They were outnumbered 10-1, but they were humanity's best. They fought with the desperation of people with nothing left to lose. Torpedoes lit up the void. Fighters danced through defensive fire that could vaporize them instantly. The dreadnoughts followed. The Indomitable led the charge. Captain Huang's ship became a spear of fire and metal, its weapons firing constantly, its armor taking hits that would destroy smaller vessels. Around her, other dreadnoughts pushed forward through a storm of death. Ships died, the UES Resolute, the UES Vindication, the UES Fearless. But the fleet kept moving. Commander Park watched the tactical displays with growing horror. Losses were mounting faster than predicted. They were paying in blood for every kilometer of space. But they were also pushing the Valreth back, creating a corridor through the blockade. If they could just reach the jump point, some ships could escape. War Prince Kethris recognized the breakout attempt immediately. He ordered reinforcements to the threatened sector and took personal command of the defense. Scholar Thys watched beside him, seeing the desperation she had warned about. The humans were willing to sacrifice everything for even a small chance of survival. The battle became a nightmare. Valreth reinforcements arrived faster than humans could advance. Nam's squadron was nearly destroyed. He survived through skill and luck. The Indomitable took catastrophic damage. Its reactor was failing. Captain Huang ordered evacuation, but stayed at her post. Huang manually piloted the dying ship to create a debris field that would provide cover for the retreating fleet. She thought about her crew, safely in escape pods. She thought about Earth. She thought about the war they were fighting. Then the reactor went critical. The explosion took a Valreth battleship with it. Captain Minji Huang died as she lived, protecting others. The breakout failed. The human fleet fell back after terrible losses. Nearly half the dreadnoughts were gone. Thousands dead, the Indomitable and its captain lost. Lieutenant Nam's squadron reduced to 3 fighters from the original 30. The corridor they carved through the blockade closed almost immediately. Admiral Kang sat in his command chair aboard the battered Defiance, staring at casualty reports. He had lost friends, colleagues, some of humanity's best people. The blockade remained intact. Conventional warfare had failed. He thought about Captain Huang's sacrifice and all the sacrifices before her. He called Dr. Choi. The conversation was brief. He authorized deployment of the nanomachine weapon, not as a first strike but as a deterrent. He would give the Valreth one chance to negotiate seriously. If they refused, humanity would unleash a weapon that might doom everyone but would definitely doom the Valreth Empire. Dr. Choi began preparing the weapon. She knew the ethical lines they were crossing, but also knew extinction was worse. She built in safeguards. The weapon would only target Valreth biology. It would have a limited lifespan. It would self-destruct after a set period. It was still terrible, still dangerous, but it was the best she could do. Admiral Kang broadcast his message across all frequencies. He spoke plainly. Humanity had developed a weapon that could destroy the Valreth species. They didn't want to use it. They wanted to negotiate an end to the war. But if the Valreth forced humanity's extinction, they would drag the Empire down with them. To prove the weapon was real, he deployed a small sample on an evacuated Valreth outpost. Within hours, the station was consumed, reduced to dead metal and scattered atoms. The demonstration was broadcast galaxy-wide. Humanity had created a doomsday weapon, and they were willing to use it. High Commander Velrax watched the demonstration and felt true fear for the first time in his long life. This weapon didn't just kill ships, it could end his entire species. The humans weren't bluffing. They really would choose mutual destruction over surrender. War Prince Kethris immediately advised negotiations. Scholar Thys confirmed the weapon was real and possibly unstoppable if deployed at full scale. War Prince Kethris arrived in the solar system under a flag of truce. His ship was escorted by human fighters that could destroy him at any moment. He met Admiral Kang on a neutral station built hastily between the 2 battle lines. Both sides were wary. Weapons remained ready. Trust was non-existent. Kethris proposed terms. The Valreth would withdraw from the solar system and recognize human sovereignty. In exchange, humanity must destroy the nanomachine weapon and promise never to build it again. They would establish a demilitarized zone and limited trade. It was a compromise where both sides got something while preventing mutual destruction. Admiral Kang listened carefully but saw the trap. Humanity would be disarmed while the Valreth Empire stayed intact. He countered with harder terms. The Valreth must withdraw from all systems within 50 light-years of Earth. They must release conquered territories. They must allow human observers to monitor their military. The nanomachine weapon would be kept as a deterrent against future aggression. Negotiations dragged on for weeks. Both sides tested each other, looking for weakness. Commander Park analyzed every Valreth communication for hidden meanings. Scholar Thys, attending as Kethris's advisor, tried to find common ground between two species that had been trying to kill each other. Progress was slow and painful. Neither negotiator knew that High Commander Velrax had no intention of honoring any agreement. He assembled a strike force in secret. Elite commandos would attack during a negotiation session. War hunter ships would destroy Earth's orbital defenses simultaneously. Velrax would kill human leadership, destroy the weapon, and crush the solar system while humanity was disorganized. Scholar Thys discovered Velrax's plan through careful monitoring of military communications. She was torn between loyalty to her species and what she knew was right. Warning humanity meant betraying the Empire. Staying silent meant watching both civilizations destroy each other. She thought about everything she had learned about humans and their capacity for both violence and mercy. She requested a private meeting with Admiral Kang, claiming technical details about the treaty needed discussion. Instead, she revealed everything. The strike force gathering, the timing of the attack, the targets. Within 48 hours, Velrax would attempt to end the war through treachery. Admiral Kang believed her. The intelligence was too specific to be a trick. But now he faced a choice. Prepare openly for the attack and risk the Valreth knowing their plan was exposed, or proceed normally and spring a counter-trap. Commander Park suggested a third option: let the attack happen but turn it into humanity's final victory. Kang moved the nanomachine weapon to a secure location. He positioned the remaining dreadnoughts to respond instantly to any attack. He warned Earth Command but ordered them to appear unprepared. The negotiations would continue as if nothing was wrong, giving Velrax a target he couldn't resist. Dr. Choi prepared a modified version of the weapon. This variant would target only military systems, not living tissue. Weapons, drives, shields would fail, but crews would survive. It was her attempt to find a moral solution in an immoral situation. Disable rather than destroy. It wasn't perfect, but it was better than genocide. Lieutenant Nam led a skeleton crew defending the negotiation station. His squadron was down to 8 fighters, but they were the 8 best pilots humanity had left. He knew they were bait but accepted it. Someone had to stand in the open for the trap to work. The day of the attack arrived. Kethris sat across from Admiral Kang, discussing details of the demilitarized zone. He genuinely believed they were close to an agreement. He didn't know that in hours everything would explode. The assault began with surgical precision. Valreth commandos dropped from stealth ships onto the negotiation station. War hunter squadrons emerged from hiding to strike Earth's defenses. Velrax himself led the main fleet, abandoning the blockade to crush humanity once and for all. But the humans were ready. Station security, far more heavily armed than they appeared, opened fire the instant the commandos appeared. What looked like a diplomatic delegation included special forces who had been waiting for this exact moment. The commandos were dead within minutes. Lieutenant Nam's squadron engaged the war hunters before they reached Earth. 8 fighters against 40 warships should have been a massacre. Instead, Nam led his pilots in a dance of destruction. They used every trick learned over months of warfare. They didn't destroy the war hunters, but they delayed them long enough. The human dreadnoughts, supposedly scattered and weak, appeared in perfect formation. They had been hiding in the asteroid belt, waiting. Commander Park had calculated the optimal engagement pattern down to the second. The Valreth war hunters found themselves surrounded and outgunned. High Commander Velrax realized too late that he was the one caught in a trap. His commandos were dead. His war hunters were being destroyed. His main fleet was committed to a battle where humans held every advantage. For the first time in his military career, Velrax understood what it meant to be completely outmaneuvered. War Prince Kethris, aboard his diplomatic vessel, learned of the attack and realized Velrax had destroyed any chance for peace. He faced a terrible choice: return to his fleet and continue a war he knew was lost, or actively help humanity end this before both species destroyed each other. He chose humanity. Kethris broadcast on all Valreth military frequencies. He ordered his ships to stand down. He exposed Velrax's treachery. He declared the High Commander unfit for command. He announced his support for the peace treaty. It was mutiny and treason, but Kethris believed the Empire's arrogance would doom them all if someone didn't break the cycle. The Valreth fleet split. About half followed Kethris and withdrew from combat. The other half stayed loyal to Velrax and kept fighting, but the split destroyed any hope of Valreth victory. The civil fracture completed what human weapons began. Admiral Kang ordered Dr. Choi to deploy the modified weapon. Not against ships that stood down, but against Velrax's loyalists. Within minutes, the Valreth ships still fighting found their weapons failing. Shields collapsed. Engines died. They weren't destroyed, but they were helpless. Velrax watched his fleet die around him. Not through glorious battle, but through technology he didn't understand. His ship, the Sovereign Talon, was one of the last to fall. Systems failed one by one. Life support held, but everything that made a warship dangerous was gone. He sat in his command chair, finally understanding how completely he had failed. Admiral Kang broadcast to the disabled Valreth ships: surrender and live, resist and die. It was the same ultimatum Velrax gave Earth months ago. The irony was clear to everyone. One by one, Valreth ships signaled surrender. The war was over. Human soldiers boarded the Sovereign Talon. They found Velrax still in his command chair, refusing to acknowledge defeat. Admiral Kang came personally to accept the surrender. The ancient Valreth commander looked at the human who defeated him and finally asked the question eating at him. "Why didn't you use the full weapon? You could have destroyed us all." Kang's answer was simple: "Because we're not monsters. We fight to survive, not to exterminate. That's the difference between humanity and the empire you built. We remember there's a difference between an enemy and evil." Velrax had no response to that. He had spent his entire life conquering and destroying. The concept of restraint in victory was completely alien to him. It was perhaps the final lesson in a war built on arrogance meeting reality. War Prince Kethris met with Admiral Kang after the surrender. The two commanders who had been enemies now worked together to prevent further bloodshed. They established terms for the formal peace treaty. The war that almost destroyed both species was ending not with annihilation, but with exhausted compromise. Scholar Thys watched the proceedings with quiet satisfaction. Her warnings had been ignored for so long. Her imprisonment for speaking truth had seemed like the end. But in the end, knowledge and wisdom proved more valuable than blind pride. Both species would survive because someone chose understanding over loyalty to a failed system. Dr. Choi deactivated the weapon systems. The modified nanomachines would degrade naturally within days, leaving the Valreth ships damaged but repairable. It was a mercy Velrax never would have shown, but humanity chose a different path. They proved you could win a war without becoming what you fought against. Lieutenant Nam and his surviving pilots returned to their carrier. Of the 30 pilots who started the war, only 5 remained alive. The cost had been terrible, but they had protected Earth. They had fought with everything they had. Now they could finally rest. Commander Park reviewed the final battle statistics. Every calculation had been perfect. Every move precisely timed. But the numbers couldn't capture the human cost. Thousands dead, families destroyed, lives forever changed. Victory was real, but it came soaked in blood and sacrifice. Admiral Kang stood on the observation deck of the Defiance, looking at the scattered debris from 3 major battles. Ships from both sides floating dead in space. Each piece of wreckage represented people who would never go home. He had won the war, but the weight of command would stay with him forever. The war ended not with celebration, but with exhausted relief. Both sides had pushed each other to the brink of extinction. The war ended not with celebration, but with exhausted silence. The solar system was filled with debris from both sides. The human fleet was a shadow of what it once was. Tens of thousands dead, including Captain Huang and so many others. The cost of survival had been almost unbearable. Admiral Kang supervised the surrender process personally. Valreth ships were disarmed and moved to designated areas. Prisoners received food, shelter, and medical care according to rules of war. Many humans questioned this mercy. They wanted revenge for lost loved ones.
Kang was firm.
Humanity fought to defend itself, not to become executioners. War Prince Kethris negotiated the formal peace treaty. The terms were harsh but not cruel. The Valreth Empire must withdraw from recently conquered systems. They must dismantle their world-killer weapons. They must allow human observers to monitor their military. In exchange, humanity would destroy the nanomachine weapon and establish diplomatic relations. Two species that tried to destroy each other now had to learn to coexist. High Commander Velrax was tried for war crimes by a tribunal of both human and Valreth judges. It was a symbol of the new order. Justice rather than revenge. He was found guilty but not executed. Instead, he was imprisoned for life, forced to watch his empire transform into something he wouldn't recognize. For someone who valued honor and conquest above all, it was worse than death. Word of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy. Species the Valreth had conquered saw that resistance was possible. Rebellions broke out in occupied systems. The empire that seemed invincible was suddenly breaking apart. Kethris, now leading the Valreth government, tried to manage the dissolution peacefully. He granted independence rather than fighting more losing wars. Scholar Thys became humanity's unofficial ambassador to the Valreth. She helped bridge the cultural gap between species. She wrote books about the lessons both sides should learn. That arrogance leads to defeat. That different doesn't mean inferior. That peace requires understanding, not just tolerance. Her work became essential reading for anyone studying interspecies relations. Dr. Choi destroyed the nanomachine weapon as required by treaty. But the knowledge remained, locked away and heavily guarded but preserved. If humanity ever faced another existential threat, they would have options. It made some people uncomfortable, but most accepted it as necessary. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Commander Park was promoted to Admiral and given command of Earth's defensive fleet. He was young for the position but proven. His job was to ensure humanity stayed strong enough that no one else would try what the Valreth attempted. He took the responsibility seriously. Peace was sustained by strength, not just goodwill. Lieutenant Nam struggled with survivor's guilt. Of his original squadron of 30, only 3 survived the war. He attended memorial services. He visited families. He tried to understand why he lived when better pilots died. Eventually, he accepted a position training the next generation. He would make sure they had the skills to survive what he barely survived himself. Admiral Kang became a living legend, but felt only exhaustion. He won a war but lost thousands under his command. Captain Huang's death weighed particularly heavy. She was one of the best officers he ever knew. He requested retirement, but was convinced to stay as chief military advisor. The galaxy needed steady hands in this uncertain peace. A memorial was built in Earth's orbit, a massive structure listing every human who died in the war. Visible from the ground, it served as a permanent reminder of the cost of freedom. Kang attended the dedication ceremony and gave a speech. His words were brief but powerful. They died so humanity could live. We honor them by building a future worthy of their sacrifice. War Prince Kethris visited the memorial with Scholar Thys. He left a Valreth honor marker, acknowledging the bravery of former enemies. It was a small gesture but significant, the first time a Valreth leader formally honored alien warriors. It marked the beginning of real reconciliation between species. With the blockade lifted, humanity finally ventured into the wider galaxy. They discovered a community of species, some friendly, some wary, all aware of what humans accomplished. Earth became known not for technology or resources, but for stubborn refusal to surrender. Humanity's reputation preceded them, dangerous when threatened, honorable in victory. Trade agreements were signed. Alliances formed. Humanity shared some military technology in exchange for scientific knowledge. The Dreadnoughts remained in service, but increasingly as symbols rather than active weapons. Admiral Park ensured they stayed ready. Peace but verified. The Valreth underwent a cultural transformation. The younger generation, represented by Kethris's reforms, questioned the old imperial ways. They studied human history and warfare, trying to understand how a primitive species defeated them. Scholar Thys's books became required reading in Valreth military academies. The Empire learned humility, though the lesson was painful. Other species watched both humans and Valreth carefully. Some saw humanity as potential saviors against oppression. Others saw them as a new threat. After all, they built weapons capable of exterminating entire species. Earth's leaders walked a careful balance. Strong without being threatening, helpful without being domineering. It was a difficult line to walk. 5 years passed. Admiral Kang, truly retired now, walked through the memorial garden built around the orbital monument. He was older and grayer, but still carried himself with quiet authority. He came here often, speaking to the names on the wall, telling them about the peace their sacrifice bought. He was joined by Admiral Park, Lieutenant Commander Nam, Dr. Choi, and War Prince Kethris. They had become unlikely friends, bound by shared trauma and mutual respect. They discussed the state of the galaxy, the challenges of maintaining peace, the slow work of reconciliation. Scholar Thys presented Kang with her new book. It was dedicated to Captain Huang and all who fell on both sides. Kang accepted it with quiet gratitude, knowing it represented something important: acknowledgement, learning, growth. They watched as school children visited the memorial. Human, Valreth, and other species all together. A teacher explained the war, its causes and consequences. The children asked questions with curiosity untainted by the hatred of the past. It was a small moment, but significant. The next generation learning from history rather than repeating it. Admiral Kang turned to his companions and spoke. "We didn't win a war. We survived one. There's a difference. Every species in this galaxy will face its moment of testing. Our test was the Valreth. We passed barely. The real victory is what we do with the peace we earned." Decades later, the Dreadnoughts still patrolled the solar system, but they were joined by ships from allied species. The United Earth Fleet evolved into something larger, a defensive coalition protecting not just Earth but any species facing extinction-level threats. Admiral Park's vision of peace through strength became galactic policy. The Valreth Empire no longer existed as it once did. It was now the Valreth Federation, a democratic government where former subject species had equal voice. Kethris served as its first elected leader before retiring. He was remembered as the prince who chose survival over pride. Dr. Choi's weapon remained locked away, but knowledge of its existence served as a deterrent. No species attempted a war of extermination since it was demonstrated. Some called it the galaxy's insurance policy, others called it a doomsday clock. Everyone agreed it prevented more wars than it ever would have won. Scholar Thys's books were taught across dozens of worlds. Her central message became conventional wisdom. Technological superiority means nothing without tactical flexibility and moral courage. Young Valreth studied human warfare not to copy it but to understand, the mindset that enabled a primitive species to defeat an empire. Captain Huang's sacrifice was commemorated annually with the Indomitable Award, given to officers showing exceptional bravery and leadership. Recipients included humans, Valreth, and members of previously conquered species. Heroism wasn't limited to one species. In Earth Command's archives, Admiral Kang's final report on the war concluded with a simple observation that became humanity's motto among the stars. "We are not the strongest species. We are not the most advanced. But we will never be conquered, because we know something our enemies forgot. Arrogance is always fatal, but humility is immortal." The galaxy learned its lesson. Empires fall not because they're weak, but because they forget to adapt. Humanity's dreadnoughts became symbols of that lesson. Massive, powerful, standing as reminders that the greatest weapon isn't technology but the refusal to surrender to arrogance, whether it's the enemy's or your own. The war was over. The peace was hard won and carefully maintained. Both species emerged changed, hopefully wiser. The Valreth learned that conquest wasn't destiny. Humanity learned that victory required restraint. Together they proved that even the bitterest enemies could find common ground if they chose survival over pride. The memorial in Earth's orbit remained a silent witness to all this. Names carved in metal, floating in space, reminding everyone of the price. Wars end, peace comes. But the cost is never forgotten. That memory, more than any weapon, ensured that neither side would ever forget the terrible price of arrogance and the greater value of understanding.